Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for mini Ice Age conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series. And I welcome you this evening on this beautiful blue planet, or this morning or this afternoon, wherever you reside across the face of the earth. Welcome one, welcome all. It is a time of change. These cycles are on certain days. We just had the solstice, on the 21st, and then right at Christmas, it finally turns, and then each day after that, we start gaining a minute per day. And you know, if we do go back in time, does anybody remember the 1980s? Where's the beef? Remember the old Wendy's lady? Where's the beef? Well, I think in 2021, we could say, where are the workers? Where are the workers? Because I'm seeing right now, our civilization is at the point where our most basic services are starting to fail. Millions, 4 to 5 million in the workforce gone, as opposed to pre-pandemic working. So where did all these people go to? So this is just in the United States. The number of people that are actually working is close to 4 million below the pre-pandemic peak. So if you were to say that those 4 million people, they just didn't disappear off the planet. I know a few of them had the chance to retire. Not all, because the workforce is quite large. It goes from 18 all the way up to 65. Those people need to generally keep working because they have bills. So what's with all the help wanted signs, not enough workers around, and every day we're starting to see the continuous cat and mouse of mandates, no mandates. You know, I did a video on mandates being rescinded, talking about basic infrastructure, and Amtrak suspended vaccine mandates because they had to start shutting down routes, staff shortages, and we're seeing it in the airlines. And you're seeing it in every single store you've gone into. I hope everybody had a great Christmas as we move now into Hanukkah and the new year. If anybody was gift shopping, did you notice the lack of workers in the stores? Yeah, it was super busy, and they tried to have extra staff, and I'm glad a few stores did. But generally, it was a bunch of people running around with chickens with their heads cut off, like looking for things to buy, and nobody to ask, where's this thing on this aisle? Yes, the registers were full of people taking money in, but out in the back of the store, it was like 2 people and 500 people in the store asking questions. It was a little bit Looney Tunes, shall we say. And by the way, speaking of Looney Tunes, around the holiday table, we were talking about being kids and the kind of cartoons there were, Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner, these kind of, older cartoons, Peanuts, none of that exists anymore. None. And we were talking about how all that generation has been memory holed. Not even a single cartoon anywhere. And an older person who was with us, she was in her late 70s, was talking about Gunsmoke. And you can't find a single episode of Gunsmoke on TV anymore, not even on those nostalgia channels unless you pay for it. So like the old history of what we've grown up with is considered the base of the layer of, existence for people, is totally being memory holed and gone and replaced with something new. And I had the same question, hey, what about the people back in the 1940s that were coming into this new era after World War II? Like, was everything that was prior to that, black and white movies, all those things from the 1920s, recordings, radio was all brand new, was that all memory hold too? After World War II in the 1950s, and then everybody had completely forgotten about anything from 1910, 20, 30, just like it is now. If you're 50 years old, there's really nothing left from when you were a kid. It's all completely gone. And, that was the conversation that we had a little bit. We avoided politics, but we're not going to do that tonight. I have Ransom Godwin from 420 TV Freedomist Films, who I owe an apology for getting his channel banned for a 7-day upload on YouTube last time. because we were broadcasting live, and I said some naughty statements about truth that was not allowed in YouTube's algorithm. And, so if anybody does want to support Ransom, get on over there, subscribe to the channel. And, even topics today of just what's even being talked about on mainstream news is not even allowed to be talked about amongst people unless you agree 100% with every statement. It's crazy where it's going right now. And 2022, I got a couple forecasts for us tonight, looking out food pricing, your availability of food, your access to food. So anyway, it's going to be a fun show. Ransom, thank you for joining me. How's it going in life over there?
Relatively good, yeah. I'm tripping on the whole workforce thing because I was reading into that, and you kind of led with that. If it isn't a pandemic restriction that's not allowing people to work, you're going to find out that a lot of these companies are not going to be able to even hire people because they don't have the energy, because all kinds of weird stuff has been happening across the U.S. that you could tie together as signs of the times, like blizzards and wildfires. And it seems like things like, I just saw an article out of or was it the Sun, about over in Baltimore, one of their big coal manufacturing plants just mysteriously blew up. So, I'm sure they'll have issues with this winter. That's if you haven't noticed out there, the global warming is really bad this year with lots of snow and all kinds of stuff coming. We're barely at the very first part of winter, and you already see stuff like that. Now, it might not be super bad, but I have been scouring through articles talking about dates from now, and it seems like that the governments of the world, early back, and you were talking about the 80s, about how things get memory hold. PNAC, the project for a new American century, it's been pretty much memory hold, because most people that in the internet world are either not old enough to even know what was going on around 9/11 and prior to that, or it's been memory hold and they just never learned about it. But either way, in that document was very interesting things about the future. And then now we're here at that future that they were talking about. So when you read other things that are talking about how everything is going to change between the years 2022 and 2025, where on the other end in 2025 we'll be living in a world that no one recognizes, and I think it'll happen so exponentially fast now that we're getting into it. We're like right in the middle of the, if you believe in it, the New World Order takeover. It was kind of born in on 9/11 there, in front of the trade centers. You know how they collapsed in front of Columbia, their weird goddess. The whole thing was like a weird blood ritual that the entire world had to participate in, because they didn't let anyone not know about 9/11. And then you have that new shiny obelisk building, the One World Trade Center. So it was born right there on 9/11, and now we're well into the middle of it. And my point being, in the project for a new American century, one of the main kind of things that the think tank people were talking about at that time was, by this time, that they would have complete control over the human domain using AI, and that the Air Force and other parts of the military would be completely AI run. What I mean by that is drones and military equipment, kill bots, things of this nature, that they would have up and running by this time, 2022 to 2025. In the document, it wanted to have the complete Air Force, all of it, no pilots, just all artificial intelligence ran aircraft. And then so I was digging through these files thinking about that, and I can't find it, speaking of memory hold, like a good portion that talks about that. But I did find this Air Force magazine article from 1996, and in it talks about the future right now, and it was based on a paper called Air Force 2025. And when you look into that, they're talking about a giant hostile Asian mega nation that they would have to deal with. Alternatively, a network of collaborative transnational corporations, a future plagued by widespread dispersed weapons of mass destruction, including swarms of robotic insects, attacks on cities using biological and nuclear attacks. The American armed forces might have to deal with death rays capable of vaporizing aircraft. And this was, this was just an article in the Air Force Times, and they're talking about all of this stuff, and they cite the PNAC in their article. And now we're at that time. And what do you see in the world right now besides the rise of AI? There's several articles right now on Drudge Report talking about exactly that. Killbots, how every nation in the world, including Russia, China, the United States, is trying to change their forces over to killbots. And there are people at the United Nations wanting to, stop that or ban that before it becomes a well practice. And I've read plenty of articles, that insinuate that they're already, well into practicing proxy wars with these robots already. Now, the public hasn't seen it, but if you think about the time we're living in, and then you go back to the labor shortage, they're about to implement a whole new world reality on everyone, where the worker is not needed other than being a number that needs to be reduced. We're at 7.8 billion people now, and the fad of all the nations is to stay home, be locked down, suppress your immune system. And now we're going into where we're admitting that countries are about to have food shortages. I'm sure you saw that article I sent over, talking about the collapse of China and how that they're already locking down all of their food in preparation for the world grain shortage, and that they have, like half of the world's supply of it already locked down, ready for this event that we're now well into. And, I don't mean to ramble on, but now we're in that time, and I'm looking and I'm seeing, autonomous truckers doing their first state to state solo with nobody in there. There's a trucking job that somebody might have, but there's going to be a lot of people out of business. And guess what? Truckers aren't going to strike when they don't agree with something political if they're a bunch of robots. I'll leave it there for a second, but this is a reality that we're living in right now. It's not even a future movie. It's right before our very lives right now.
Yeah, and that does bring me into the global grain supply here. And over the last couple of days, I've been trying to figure out, might the next steps be of what you're referring to. So I'm also looking at the Hal Turner Radio Show. If anybody knows this one, his website, Ransom, I encourage you to go there, halturnerradioshow.com. There is a new drone that they have footage of here that goes from 0 to 120 miles per hour in 1 second. And the caption is "running away, not an option." And they show this thing for 7 seconds launching off a picnic table and hitting the tree line in just a second. And a tree line's quite some distance. Can't use anti-drone radio jammers or rifles against it. It happens too fast. And this is what comes right back into your autonomous world we're moving to. Now, who can control those? Because, we've seen these movies pre-programming us where they have, these swarms of drones that are moving, hundreds, if not thousands, as a cloud coming in. So as you look at this unbelievable footage of how fast this drone moves, you could see if you had 100 of these going at that speed at 120 miles an hour, there'd be no way for anything to defend against that. I guess if you had an EMP directed shoulder mounted weapon of sorts where you could, hit a radius of the sky and knock everything out, other than that. But see, you talk about the truckers, and I pulled this video the other day. Somebody sent it to me on my Telegram channel. If anybody wants to join me over there at Adapt2030, telegram.te. Look for me, Adapt2030 on Telegram. Trucker warns that vaccine requirements for Canada and the U.S. border crossings are going to result in 15% of all trucks being parked. And this guy is coming out and says, I'm not getting it. An enormous amount of guys I drive with aren't getting it. And this is deliberate sabotage to the supply chain. For us in the US and Canada, he puts a little list here. Check, empty shelves, food prices, lack of supplies for industry to function, and that should be a plural, industries to function. And one of the big things he was talking about, lack of seeds and fertilizer for agriculture. Now, from the Canadian side, remember, they're growing a little bit cooler weather crop, and they're really heavily into the canola, rapeseed oil, versus what would be growing in the States for that. And again, their seasons are much shorter up there. If you're going, a couple 100 miles north of the border, 300 miles north, there's some productive grains regions there, but they're real short-lived. So they're always using, high growth, maximum maturation in 90 days kind of seeds. We're down in the States, if you're in Nebraska, you're looking at 120 days to get some serious head and girth on that. But the way that these truckers are coming out right now and quote unquote, this is how civilization ends, not perhaps with a bang, but a series of cascading failures and degeneracy. So you're hearing it from many, many different facets here. And if anybody followed the Adapt 2030 channel on that long video, I took a lot of time and effort to put in yesterday's video, how the fertilizer shortages are inbound for 2022, and what Sri Lanka is living through currently is the canary in the coal mine of what we are going to be living through at the end of 2022. Now, Sri Lanka had, this is back in May of 2021, finally gotten to move the legislature over to forbid all pesticides and herbicides and chemical fertilizers and move over to 100% organic food production on the island, in the nation. And people thought it would be a great thing, that they thought the soils had been built up enough nutrient-wise that they could still get good production out. Well, whatever happened, the policymakers didn't take enough of a look at what the organic yields would be. Declines of about 25%, just on an average. Not that there's anything wrong with the soils. It's just organic farming is not as productive as what we consider petrochemical, nitrogen fertilizer, ammonia, and natural gas produced chemical fertilizers. They're more productive. So Sri Lanka is in this point now where they don't have enough food. They have pulled back and 180-degree flopped backwards and said, we need fertilizers. Oh, sorry. Difficult to get and 3 times higher price than they were 6 months ago. And they're in a conundrum now because now they're rationing staples and they're going to have to ration staples further again. And that when I say staples, I'm talking about rice, potatoes, onions, tomatoes, this sort of thing. They thought they could, with the declining yields off of the petrochemical fertilizers, start to import more food and offset and still break even where nobody would notice. But when everybody else's import costs were doubling, people started to notice. At the same time, there's natural gas shortages and propane shortages. So even if you're able to access the food, you cannot cook it. And then people were starting to start fires on their porches to cook food, and the amount of smoke in the city of Colombo itself, along with the number of house fires because of this, they had put a blanket, thing down in the city, no more fires on your balcony to cook food. And they're into electrical blackout rotating. This all stemmed from not having enough fertilizer and not being able to feed themselves. Okay, let's fast forward into 2022. If we're looking at Syria, this is a headline from December 20th off Middle Eastern and North Africa News off the New Arab. Syria's wheat production lowest in 50 years with fears of mass starvation. Okay, you can add Sri Lanka right into that same list. And if you do look around, the urea shortages that are in Australia are going to start to diminish the fuel capacity of diesel that's then going to go into the trucks, that's going to slow down deliveries, and you're going to get in that cascade of non-delivery because they don't have urea for the fuel. But then urea they won't have for the fertilizers in Australia either. So you could probably put Australia after next year onto this same list. And as we look forward, as a general rule of thumb, 12% is the magic number you're looking at. 12% globally in availability of fertilizers. Plus, every year over the last 10 years, there's been a 4.7% increase in need of fertilizers to continue to expand global agricultural production to feed the new mouths that were brought onto the planet. And the reason I would say that is now we're looking at like a 16% deficit, not just 12, because if we do need that extra 5%, but then magically we start to look at what's happening with COVID and all these disappearing workers. Maybe those are mouths that won't need to be fed. But at the end of the day, whatever it is, your access to food is going to be more tightly controlled. We are going to start to see some of the same symptoms and signs that Sri Lanka is currently experiencing, but on the global level. For those that don't produce fertilizers internally themselves, United States, look out. We put so much reliance on China producing the base chemicals for the fertilizers that we just relied that it would be on a ship over to. But now how many ships are delayed? Okay, subset A. But then in the United States, if we want to start our own fertilizer production again, you look around, they still haven't repaired the ammonia factory in Louisiana from the hurricane months and months ago, which was, by the way, the #1 ammonia producing facility in the United States, in Louisiana. So even if we want to start our own fertilizer industry again, we just can't at this current moment until we retool and set the factories back up again. Then swing over to Europe, the natural gas war is going on there. Natural gas is a main constituent to produce chemical fertilizers, which Europe is not producing at all right now. They're struggling to keep the lights on. Now there's rolling blackouts in Slovenia and Bulgaria, and word is in Croatia, in the Istria area, which is also on the border with Slovenia. Wouldn't surprise me if there were some cross tension wires coming in from Slovenia, and that's the reason. But you're starting to see now Europe is starting to crack under the natural gas pricing and unavailability. Swing around the world, so that means this year that urea shortages, no fertilizer, reduced diesel fuel in Australia. They're a big producer. China has just bought half of the world's grain supply. What do they know about grain that we don't, or they're not telling us? Plus, they control the lion's share of fertilizer production. United States, we're not anywhere close to producing what we need. Oops. And as we swing into Europe, they're not going to be forthcoming with their fertilizer either. So, maybe 12% is a rosy forecast that they were putting out. Because do some number crunching with me here. 12% reduction in fertilizer is not going to be across the board a 12% reduction in yield on a global basis. It's probably going to be more, just like they experienced in Sri Lanka. At the very best conditions, they were minus 25% on organic fertilizer, but reading further into the articles on it, they didn't train the farmers how to 100% swing the pendulum over into organic production. So over 70% of the farmers that were supposed to grow organically weren't trained on how to grow organically. They just said, no more chemical fertilizers, go organic, work it out, good luck. And there was no training for them. So it was a system-wide failure. It wasn't 25% reduction. Some places were as much as 60% reduced in their food production. So I could see very well the same thing happening, 12% global on the fertilizer reduction, but some places are going to be hitting 30+% reductions in their output, and it depends which country it is. And even, reading off ag facts, they're saying that farmers in the United States understand they're not going to have enough fertilizer, so they're scrambling to save all their cow manure to start to fertilize the fields again. Okay, if you had a grandfather still out on the field, they know how to do that. That's all they did when they first started farming before they converted over to 100% petrochemical. The older generation is our knowledge base. We need them so desperately right now. If you see anybody who's 80, walk up and give them a hug and say, thank you for keeping the knowledge of the old world in your brain. We need it right now so much. Can you please help us? because the older farmers are who you need to get this manure thing in the fields working at some level. Because you can't tell me that the American farmers that are out there on 50,000 acres are going to be able to manure spread 50,000 acres. They're using pellets when they do that in the agribiz. Slow dissolving, months long release on the petrochemical fertilizers. Cow dung, that's a slow release, way slow, and your yields are going to be so reduced. If you're going to move from completely depleted soil that only grows because you put the new amount of fertilizer in it, and you're going to totally stop the petrochemical fertilizers and move into cow dung and try to replace that microbial, there's no microbes in the soils that our main grow belts are dead soil. It only grows because they put the fertilizer on it. No fertilizer, no food. And here they're going to come with some scrimpy replacement of cow dung. But wait a second, I'm sorry. We reduced all the cows because they were polluters, the methane thing. Global warming, it's about methane. Oh, CO2 is not bad. It's the methane. It's the cows. You can't eat meat. We got to get rid of the cows. So think about how many millions of cows have been reduced. So right there's your fertilizer source. Now, I am saying perhaps human manure is a possibility where they go into every sewage treatment plant across the United States. They start digging in the tanks there and, take it through some sort of process to kill the bacteria in a super speedy fashion. Generally, it takes a year to do that. If you're going to do some biogas digestion to bring that out so it's not what we consider harmful to human health, and spread that on the fields because there's not enough cow dung across the states. This is where we sit today. They're moving back to cow dung because we've run out of fertilizer and the farmers already realize it. This should be an aha moment for most people. And look at how the cattle industry has been so demonized along with dairy, and they've gotten rid of most of the fertilizer producing animals. So where does that live? Well, that's a purposeful move in my plan. Like if you knew the fertilizer shortages were not forthcoming, and you were on a plan, like Ransom, you said they were already talking about, owning this from 2021 to 2025. If this had all been gamed out and they released the COVID thing as a reduction of protests against international banking and central banking back 2018-19, they would have for sure gamed this out on the whole trucking stopping, fertilizer stopping. But over the last 10 years, they've also removed all the cows out of the mix too. So, we're in a very precarious position. So my advice is to you and everybody listening, buy grow lights now. Because there's going to be a run on those, because once you realize you're going to have to do grow lights in your house, there'll be a major delay in the next round 2 of grow lights coming, and they'll be way more expensive. So if you get a handful of grow lights now, they're going to be cheaper and available. But as soon as this word gets out, I'm saying no later than March of this next year, maybe even February, March, when they come into some sort of pre-preparation for the fields and planting, word's going to get out on the street, and there is panic will ensue. When the world wakes up and realizes there's not enough fertilizer to grow an amount of food for everybody, and they're going to go into the carryover stocks, and they're not going to have a vegetable source, this is going to be an eye-opening moment for humanity. And you wonder, has the AI gamed this out, Ransom? I'm not sure, because people are going to react in a very, very negative fashion when they find this out. Very negative. They're going to be super angry.
Where's the beef? That was perfect that you said that about where's the beef, because if you think about, let's start back where you were talking about the fertilizer shortage. What does that actually mean as far as like human beings in the food chain? So a lot of that grain that was going to be grown, a lot of the stuff that was going to be grown by the fertilizer was going to go to feed livestock that people need for protein resources everywhere. So obviously if there's less grain, there's going to be shortages on what you could do with that grain. So if they're making items for humans to eat, that means there's less for livestock to eat, which means less meat, rare meat. It's going to be very rare. And you were talking about that, and you could already tell, just like you were saying, what if somebody was gaming this out to right now, where the entire Air Force like, so I'm gonna link this to exactly what you're talking about. So they want the entire Air Force to be AI, which means there's no pilots, which means anything that these people would see normally flying in these aircraft, they're not going to see. So maybe that's why, NASA, just hired a bunch of religious figureheads, with the purpose of what would they do if they had to tell the public that there's extraterrestrial life and it's here all at the same time. But let's come back down to reality and where's the beef, and we'll put that on a side note. They must have been planning this out, because the European Union just decided, what, about a week ago, I think it was, to approve insects for human consumption. And actually, here's the article. I'll send that over to you. And they're talking about in there about how great it is, how easy it is to grow, and of course also to save the environment, because if you eat beef, you're bad for the environment with the flatulence and whatnot. But according to this article here, from Bloomberg, the European Union's landmark decision last week to approve insects for human consumption was a victory for grubs and maggots. And they talk about, how you could just make all these things, and we don't have to mess up feeding our livestock, our poultry, our farm fish, our pork, and all that. We could just eat bugs. So they've done that. And then over here in the US, of course, Vanderbilt University, they're telling us to go along with that over here, telling food authorities in the US that we need to go beyond the need to follow the example of that European Union decision and make bugs, including maggots, worms, a staple for people's diets. Now, they're trying to convince people to eat bugs at the same time as we know, just paying attention, that there's probably going to be some shortages in the circle of food for humans, just because of fertilizer, not growing crops, all kinds of weird things, but also the energy consumption that they're turning down. It's kind of weird that all of these things kind of are showing up right in the same time period, if you believe in those kind of things. But just think about it. They've already got it solved out. They're going to reduce population slowly with, you know, anything from killbots to pandemic. But what do you think about the Air Force changing over to that? Means that all of the eyes in the sky that sees what's really happening around the world and gets to go up in the atmosphere, in any nation that we have something stationed at, they're not going to be real humans seeing what's going on. So I know this is kind of far out there, but what if they start making, these FEMA type centers all over the world where they put certain kinds of people for not following their directions, so they don't get their ration of worm meal and maggots, because that's easy to come up with, and we're going to have a shortage due to this, that, and the other thing. And I'm sure you saw on the news there that Iran's claiming that they're now in the space race too. So now we have all these nations all of a sudden, just like the Project for a New American Century said, that the United States needed to control low Earth orbit. And because I think that they know that there's going to be some kind of event, not unlike what wiped out Neanderthal, which, there's a lot of theories about that, but it seems like the magnetic field just collapsed on them and they couldn't handle the radiation, or maybe there was a number of different factors, but they just didn't make it. They stopped making children. The only representation of them seems to be in hybrid species that Cro-Magnon mixed with, and therefore a lot of people around the world still have a little bit of their DNA. But if you just think about the frequency changing of ultraviolet radiation and other things, at the same time as they're telling people, the sheep, I'm going to call it, to join the metaverse, where they will spend all their time, spending their cryptocurrency in an imaginary land. Meanwhile, your snacks and your foods are now rationed down to being made out of bugs, for the greater good. I don't know. Is that too much of a thing to have all at the same time happening? Rations around the world, threats of nuclear war. And David, we were talking about last Thursday about the Bikini Island tests and all the nuclear bombs that they've set off over time, and the fact that we're still here. And I was watching these islands being made in China, and all of their little boats that they were putting out there. There was like 300 or 400 little naval boats and some construction, and they're making these islands. Now, wouldn't it be weird if that's where a nuclear war broke out, is out in the middle of the ocean, so they could recreate the exact same conditions they did in the Bikini Islands, not really affecting the entire planet, but sending the whole planet into a state of constant terror, one level above anything that they've given them. I mean, because we've given them terrorists and we've given them pandemics, and what's left besides alien invasion and nuclear holocaust and starvation on a global scale?
Blackouts as well. Can you imagine the terror if everybody's lights went out for 2 months? You wouldn't even have to have the war and people would be freaked. You'd reduce the population greatly after 2 months if you just turn the power off, simply turn the power off. People can only go so far in a tank of gas, and most things, none of the stoplights would work. All your mobile phone towers would shut off probably after 36 hours. I think Emerson Battery had the longest backup in the phone tower arena there. And most of them only have 24-hour packs on them. Some have 48 hours, sometimes 72, depends on where it is and how important it is for a main somewhere. But if you're just at your random phone tower, just somewhere off the beaten path, not in the middle of a city, but out countryside way, a little bit out past the suburbs, going toward, you still got reception, but you're getting out, past the suburbs. Most of those only have a 24-hour battery backup on them. And then if you turn the power off, your refrigeration would go, you'd lose your food supply. And without that power, there would be no supermarkets. And you would just be in a very unique situation where hopefully there'd be others that could help you and you could figure out how to store what food you had until you could cook it and hopefully not have to waste everything in your fridge. That would be a terrifying one too, even for me, which I consider myself a little bit ready. I even got myself a nice little Christmas gift for those of you into the nighttime thermal devices. I got myself a thermal monocular. I'm able to see 1,200 feet out, 2 different settings. For the thing that you look at, it glows white hot. And, you can step on the wood on the deck and then walk away and you can still see your feet prints there on the deck too from the heat. It's a thermal monocular, so it picks up anything that's out. So I've seen a couple deers at night around 4 a.m. Saw some rabbits in it late night as well. But how would you could keep things recharged with solar, but when it come down to the food, that's the scariest thing, a blackout. Nuclear, like we talked about last time, they have differentiated in the mind that if one goes off over a major city, it's completely the end of the world. It'll turn into a nuclear winter, and everything will stop on a dime just because one city got nuked. But as you rightly pointed out, Ransom, there were how many? I think it was 1,800 or 2,000 nuclear tests have gone on so far. I mean, that would only be just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, even if you took out 10 major cities. The world would still keep going. I mean, look at Fukushima. They had a full meltdown there. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. I mean, you look at those things, should have been civilization ending. What they say, if the power goes out and the nuclear plants melt down, it'll be the end of the world. But we've already seen how many melt down and it hasn't been. So the fear in the mind of that splitting the hair of what a nuclear exchange would look like and really how much global damage it would cause regionally, globally, you probably want to be in the Southern Hemisphere. But the absurdity of where we're going with food and the breakdown in supply chains, 3 Boeing 747 freighters, so this is just pure freight delivery, are packed with potatoes to head to Japan amid a French fry shortage. So when we're getting to this level of absurdity where they're flying 3 full airplanes across an ocean full of potatoes because the Japanese can't buy French fries, we got a huge problem. Huge. And you can see everywhere it's looking is shortages inbound. And you're talking about the eyes in the sky. Well, that just is very much like Skynet, or I forget what movie that was, where they had the AI had taken over the skies. And I'm not talking about Terminator. It was a different movie where AI had taken over and was making all the decisions and there was no way to shut it down. So think about if everything in the skies, including satellites, the flight plans, the planes, the drones, everything is no human control any longer. That's easy to get out of control. And the space around us, magnetospheric wise, They were saying a direct effect of those tornadoes a few weeks back through Kentucky, because the upper atmosphere was compressed downward into the lower level cloud cells where it's normally not. So you're taking something at 35, 40,000 feet across the entire atmosphere and lowering it to around 5,000, 6,000 feet. And that compression of all that air mass pushed all those clouds down. When there was really nowhere for that southerly system coming up, it collided with literally a wall in the sky. And we saw what the events were here and how the rotational winds began. But if we go through the last couple of years, the compression of atmospheres is a thing in our solar system. If you want to do some news searching, for those of you news hounds that like to follow back on some stories here, Pluto's atmosphere compressed 20x in the year 2020, back in May of 2020. Then you fast forward 6 more months into, late November, and let's say November-ish. Neptune had the atmosphere reverse itself. There was a black dot storm up there that broke apart and it started spinning in the opposite direction. Now, having an atmosphere collapse is one thing, but having your entire atmosphere reverse itself is quite something else. And then Neptune had visible X flares coming off of the planet. Because if you look at X flares coming off the sun, it has that distinct X, and the more intense it is, the brighter the X in the formation is. So a lot of petroglyphs that we see that you just think are simple crosses, those are the X's that they saw coming off the sun. But when you're seeing X flare radiation coming off the planet and jumping out to the rings of Uranus and then off into space with the visible eye, no less, these are the types of energetic increases that are happening in our solar system. And then we start to talk about Jupiter, which has 10x of the aurora increasing in its activity. And Saturn the same. The poles are glowing amazingly, and the rings are starting to have some shimmer to them, is the best way to describe it. That whole energetic body in itself, from the ring to the poles, is starting to glow more luminescence. And then we swing into Mars, which just 6 months ago, it's actually 5.5, 6 months prior, this year in 2021, the mineral compositions in the crust started to glow with auroras across the planet, because it doesn't have a magnetic field like we do on Earth, where most of the energy would come down, like Jupiter as well, off the north and south poles. Same with Saturn. But since it doesn't have a magnetic pole, as we understand it, north-south, there's nowhere to orient where the aurora is going to go. So it started coming out and matching and touching in on those field lines, or I should say magnetic connections from space onto Mars. There were aurora coming out of just wherever there was giant mineral veins in the crust of Mars. They started to glow in the atmosphere, matching what the ground contours were. And now it comes to be our turn. And I'm going to absolutely unequivocally say what happened with that tornadic event and that compression in the sky over our own atmosphere is the beginning of what is really going to upset global agriculture, in addition to the fertilizer. Like, it seems like everything's being dovetailed, controlling the atmosphere and controlling the skies themselves. But at the same time, all these narratives built in to explain away the shortages. So, there's a fertilizer shortage. Oh, no, it's not a compressing atmosphere. Don't worry about the changes electromagnetically. The higher UV radiation, it's not going to affect anything but the insects, dude. And we start to get into this feedback loop that we're running into right now. So how long can they keep flying potatoes over to Japan because of a French fry shortage? We can't even get potatoes here. They're already having shortages across. They were burying 700,000 pounds of potato because they couldn't get them in the market over in Washington State. Almost 1 million pounds of potato went back in the ground in like a landfill because they couldn't get it outbound to the buyers. There wasn't enough transport available. And lo and behold, you couldn't give it away to the people. They had to bury it. What a waste of food. And they could have just given those potatoes away to anybody regional that would come and get them and process them. Ridiculous. We're flying three airplanes of potatoes to Japan, but we can't get the potatoes from Washington State down to like Tennessee, or Washington State over into Kansas. It's ridiculous how our supply chains are broken down, but they can get the potatoes across the ocean. So I don't know. I'm just rambling, Ransom. See, everything's dovetailing into a bunch of I don't know, excuses for collapse that seem to be organized in a very choreographed fashion.
Yeah, it does seem like that. And, I was just thinking about that when you were talking about flying potatoes to Japan. You imagine the Japanese saddened to realize that because the war in the South China Sea and the killer bots flying around, and maybe even EMP risk of stuff, they just can't fly goods from one continent to another any longer in the Pacific Ocean. Or maybe it's just the fact that it seems like we're going to expect the Ring of Fire to become more lively in the next decade. All of these things are dovetailing, and I think that they've war gamed these and think tank these out. And to your point about what we can eat, maybe we can just eat dinosaur legs. I just saw an article, and I sent it over to you, a science alert, and they're talking, kind of joking about mixing and matching DNA, because scientists, don't forget that time that scientists grew dinosaur legs on a chicken. So we're in such a weird time that we are in a feedback loop. We're literally, you could point out so many different times in previous cycles that we have in common, not only from the extinction level events, but just in our history. Like when you start talking about the Anunnaki and how they were mixing and mixing and matching life forces to make new animals. We're at that point now. Everything that's we can read about in our ancient past, it seems like, is dovetailing to reality now. So it kind of makes you wonder if this isn't just an elaborate, coincidence. I mean, how many coincidences can you have in a row before you realize that your entire reality is being manipulated from the basic level, from your human existence all the way up to world events? And like you said, they would really only have to say that a nuke went off somewhere. With the amount of censorship, and then we live in an era also of deep fake. There's nothing that you can watch or listen to that you can actually believe unless you're there with your own eyes. And increasingly in our time period, you're being, locked down and compartmentalized. And if you think about this on a grand scale, it really just sounds like pre-invasion plans. What do you do if you're going to invade? Well, first, you make sure there's plenty of propaganda to shape the ideas. Then you start a starvation campaign, followed by a culling campaign, and then you just completely take over without anyone really noticing that they were taken over, because it happens so fast. It's beyond a Hollywood script. And we kind of know that, Hollywood is an outlet of the elite to give us ideas, so that whenever we look at them, we dismiss them as fiction. However, I mean, how many articles have you gone through showing the changes in Earth, governments, technology, that tells you that we're not even in appearance living in the era that it seems like we are? And I'm not sure what that movie was, but actually, a lot of the movies' main plot, even the Matrix and Terminator and whatever movie you were talking about, is that the AI has taken control of the entire atmosphere. Like even in the Matrix, they've cut off electricity to the humans and sunlight, making it where they couldn't grow food, they couldn't operate their equipment, leaving only the machines in charge of things. So, machine, alien, or just communist entity, we're going into a period that's obviously we're being invaded and taken over. You can think of that in different ways, but the food shortage, I mean, when I want to go back to that, because you joke about the where's the beef. Where would the beef really come from if there's no transportation between nations because of whatever excuse at the time there is, whether it be war, pandemic, or earth changes that are happening? There's so many reasons to say that you can't get things and that you have to be on rations. It's set up from so many different angles that if they fail one or two or three of these programs, you're still in the same compartmentalized position of not getting resources. And where would you get this meat? So you're left with hunting, like you were talking about. You saw a few deers. But what happens when 350 million people realizes there's no food or not enough to go around? And, we've talked about this before, but it only takes a week or so for people to start completely losing their mind. And when you're living in a time where even the weird White House agrees that there's a national epidemic of mental health, imagine when those tummies are hungry and everyone is cut off of their addiction of pharmaceutical drugs because of no transportation. I mean, I can go on and on, not to be a doomsday person, but these are all scenarios that if any one of these areas cover something in your life, you need to be prepared for.
Happy Doomsday. Welcome and joining us tonight. Rad, so you're not too doomy. I'm watching the woman here wearing a full scuba suit with air tank and with a regulator and mask and full wetsuit on, walking through a supermarket as her COVID protection with a cart full of groceries, breathing out of a regulator off a scuba tank so she doesn't have to breathe the same air as everybody else. Yeah, if it's coming to that already, you just don't know where it's going to lead. And people bringing their own air supply into a supermarket. Hey, remember that old group, Air Supply? Wonder if it had anything to do with the modern era. We need to get our own air and bring it with us. But you sent me that one article here about plastic bags could set off these gunfire detectors. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a gunfire detector installed in acoustic systems anyway. I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, where would you even put one of these detectors at? I mean, sheesh. Is it like a smoke detector where it'll listen for a certain type of sound and alert the police? I don't know. Is that the next step toward the AI where you don't even need to call 911? Whatever's listening in on you can do it for you because it heard a certain sound in the background. What about truck backfires? Plastic bags popping can have a different sound. So what if it comes to AI controlling all of these bots and then suddenly it hears the wrong sound and then sends bots to do the dirty work because it heard the wrong sound? But oops, there's nobody to say my bad because we'll improve the algorithm next time. Collateral damage, move on to next target. And it'll be like that with no remorse at all. It's a scary world, man. Doomsdayer, you scared me on the AI thing.
Well, I wanted to get into that. That's why I sent that. And yeah, there's so many aspects of this now. Think about the AI, just straight up listening to where you're hiding your food, or maybe you were, talking to somebody about the grand solar minimum or alternative medicines or something. And that same system that's set up, and we'll get into that because I know a lot about this particular system that they started putting up in 2001. Part of their project for a new American century, which was to make sure that they have an ear on the public, and we'll get into that because I know we're coming into your break here.
I don't have any food stored up, and I shouldn't. I don't want to hoard for the public, so don't even look at me. I have nothing. I think I got a couple jars of peanut butter and maybe half a loaf of toast laying around in my whole house. Because see, I don't believe in prepping like that. That's just taking from others' ransom. I wouldn't do such a thing, and I know you don't either. I think you probably have like half a jar of jelly in addition to a couple of jars of peanut butter. I know that's all you have at your place too. Are we gonna have to start talking like this so you can't ever? Are we gonna? The funny thing. You ever see that show Get Smart where they get in that echoey thing that they always make it a comedy skit about? What'd you say? What'd you say? It was supposed to be the cone of silence. Are we going to need cones of silence? Are we going to have to ditch our phones and walk out into the forest to talk? Something like that. Are we going to have to ditch our phones and go into caves and then talk to be outside of the audio acoustic range of picking up the conversations? I mean, is this where it's going to need to go for people to communicate in the future? Because you're already seeing it in Turkey. If you have food, they're paying people to rat you out. They're giving people food for them to tell the government that you have more than a month's worth of food in your house. Now, who would know that? And you get rewarded with food if you tell on somebody who has too much food. I guess they steal from them and give it to you, kind of like the put options in the stock market. Oh, wait, I digress. David Duvine here, right along with Ransom Godwin from 420 TV Freedomist Films. We'll be back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds after these wonderful advertisers and sponsors for freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio Studio A. We'll see you in just a couple minutes after the break.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is Jim Fetzer inviting you to join me on The Raw Deal, Revolution Radio, Studio B, Tuesday and Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 5 p.m. Central, 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific, JFK, 9/11, Wellstone, Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, Charlottesville, Las Vegas. The latest on politics and foreign affairs from an unconventional point of view. Come join Revolution Radio Tuesday, Thursday, Studio B.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? You enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's Ivan Thinker. Welcome to the Crypt.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Is if you guys act now. A limited time. Check this out. You can have, because we're going to go over to a new communist system, you can have all of this and more. You can get a free sickle and a hammer. We're not going to work with this stuff. We just, it's just for decorations and shit. But we can give you all of this stuff right here. Trash on the street, hypodermic needles, you get free garbage, there's a little shit here and there. Homeless people pissing. Not only that, but with the new communist state, you can get a free vaccine right here on the sidewalk. As you can see, several people is vaccinating themselves right there. Oh, there goes the popo man. But you know what? There's a lot of people just vaccinating themselves right here on the road. It's the new communism. I know this is a little hammer. We want to give you a little one. If you don't want to be dominated too big right now, you can right now act $39.95. You can get this little hammer and this little sickle for just a little bit of communism. But you gotta act now. And you can give the Communist Party in your local area the $39.95, and we can bring you all this and more. Cities run into the ground. We can do it for you for a low, low price. Right there, $39.95. Just call the number. Woo! Communist TV. Everybody looks green out there, man. I think they're sick or some shit. I don't know why they're green out there. But everybody's green. Look, I think, if you watch this guy right here, he's gonna vaccinate himself. What you guys doing? What you guys doing over there? You guys got the free vaccine you didn't share with me, man? You know, in each state you can get, I'm sure, a free vaccination. And like I've been saying on this new channel, 420 TV totally recommends that you get fully vaccinated. You can get vaccinated twice. Matter of fact, the new, vaccines, the new technology of vaccines that's in kind of a little different than a regular vaccine, but they're calling it a vaccine. You can get 5 rounds of that for only $39.95 right now. If you call your local Communist Party, if you live in New Mexico or Texas, New Jersey, Philadelphia. Oh, and matter of fact, right here is one of, I'm really proud because we worked on this at the Communist Party right here. See this man right here? He's vaccinating himself right now. He's got a little bit of vaccination right there. I know my head's disappeared, but look, check him out. This guy right here, he's gonna he vaccinated himself right between the fingers right there. That's actually, he must be a medical professional. Actually, look, this young woman right here is vaccinating herself. Man. Yeah. You know what I'm saying, man? Did I mention our sale on communism? Right there, $39.95. Act now. And you can get free communism in your neighborhood. We'll even give you a free mask And this was stitched together. It's got two mouths we can cover up every time you go outside with the other socialists and communists. And you know, you guys ain't gonna pass diseases around to each other anymore. Because you'll have the two-bagger. That's like, you remember back in the day when you had the two-bagger because you was worried you might get an infection. Well, now you just do that to your face. It's just like your genitals, you double-bagger, you put it right over there. It's communism for only $39.95 within your own hammer and your sickle. You too can participate on shit on the sidewalks, cities burning down, and civilization collapsing. Plus, you know, with those pesky capitalists, we're gonna have to round them up and you know, put them somewhere so we can re-educate them and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Especially if you're a capitalist, right? For only $39.95 of your money, we're gonna make capitalism. You know what? For no longer, you don't have to call. We'll just go take someone else's $39.95. Then we'll pay for communism that way, and that way we don't even have to use the hammers or sickles to do any kind of work or some shit. We won't grow our food. We'll just go to their farm and take their food. I mean, they're working hard. They're working hard. They don't deserve that. They must have blue privilege. Those blue people under the earth that are growing all the mushrooms. We should go take the mushrooms. We could give them communism too. Then them guys down there need their own communism. We'll bring it to them. For real.
I could tell you why that is. There we go. I hope this isn't all right. No network error. And I was saying, you know, if you believe in free speech, please consider a donation to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com to keep Studio A and B online here. Because, you know, Ransom's channel was taken down for a full 7-day suspension because I can tell you why that is. There we go. I hope this isn't all right. Because just simple facts and talks that we were discussing that were network news through the week, and because we put our own interpretation on it, suddenly it's taboo and we're not allowed to talk about it. Ransom gets a 7-day suspension, so show them a little love and support. Head on over there, 420 TV, Freedomist Films. Subscribe to the channel. And what I was saying before, I didn't realize that everything was disconnected there. Like, we were getting a network error. It's back on again. Through the holidays, I've gone to a couple bookshops, and I know some relatives of mine are massive avid readers, which is great. Keep the brain moving, and also, you know, take a different look than just watching TV. So anyway, so I'm in this store and I was looking for some ancient history information, something specifically 4,000 years prior, 5,000 years, 6,000 years, 8,000 years prior. You're getting back into sort of what they consider Neolithic era or some type of primal human. You know, they make it look like primal humans, just barely out of the Neanderthal category. We're here only 5,000 years ago. No, it was us. Like, what were we doing for the last 8,000 years on the planet that nobody knows anything about? We're exactly the same as we were 8,000 years ago. Where did that time disappear to, and why do we have very little record of it? So anyway, I was digging around in the bookstore there in the ancient history section, and lo and behold, I got this book, The History of Ancient Asia. Cost me $10. And on page 8, right between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, there's a giant T capital that spells Tartaria, Tartaria, all the way across through Central Asia to Kyrgyzstan, way up into China, and all of what you might consider Siberia today. That giant section of Asia, like literally I'm not going to say a quarter, 1/5 of all of Asia is encompassed in Tartaria. And I couldn't believe it. I found it on the map right here from the 17th century, which means the 1600s. And people have been asking, hey, are these maps of Tartaria? Well, yeah, right here it is. A Tartaria map in the book that I bought for $10. Like, I bought it just for the one page. I haven't even really looked through the rest of the book yet. But the whole thing was about ancient civilizations And the furthest this book goes back is only 4,000 years prior. And they start with the Sumerians in Mesopotamia and the kingdom of Elam and Iran. And then if we come further, the Phoenicians and the Sea Peoples. And then you come to the Hittites in the Indus Valley, cradles of civilization. The Vedic period, which, by the way, goes back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years in stories about the same thing, nuclear exchanges prior to this. So the destroyer of worlds this time. What about last time? So, the deeper you go back in history, the murkier it gets. So what was prior to 4,000 years ago? And what, if we're talking about plagues through the ages, comets bringing plagues, cycles of cometary bombardment, and the way that governments would control the citizens if they knew these cycles were inbound, that should not be censored. And the effects of cosmic radiation and people being born into a different energy field, that should not be censored either, but it was. We were talking about an enormous amount of multiple layers on top of children being born at this instant, and that was deemed too scary for YouTube to let us go through with the algorithm last time. Ransom got banned for that. So it's really, you can't talk about cycles of ancient history and plagues across the land through times, without anything being flagged as you're a denier, whatever that means these days. But anyway, free speech right here, freedomslips.com. Ransom, I'm done rambling, but I found the Tartaria map, and I thought it was quite interesting, because how much of our history is hidden, and how many of these cycles do you think we've gone through prior in history where we're just at another repeat, back at the rodeo again one more time? And give me a projection for 2022. I was telling you about fertilizer shortages. What's on your mind for 2022?
I think that if anybody's smart, they would be collecting physical things that will help them live life without any help. So tools, a lot of people don't think about that, but just all of these things that you take for granted from the box stores, you may not be able to, get anything close to that. And collecting old tools, especially some of these tools, like old drills and things like that. Lots of tools that you don't need electricity for, where you can still manipulate the environment. If you're left alone. Yeah, that was weird. I don't know what happened. I went to the website there and we got cut off or whatever, and it said network error, and then you came back on there, and I was thinking, that's just kind of what I was about to be talking about. When we were talking about these gunshot detectors, and in that article, they talk about how they're having to teach the algorithm, which is the CNN, the convolutional neural network. So this is a algorithm that is fed many sounds. And in this instance, they're talking about gunshots and how they were using other things like popping bags and things like that to teach the algorithm, the learning machine, the difference between this noise and that noise. Now, if you take this and you put it on a different set of variables, say human speech, you can see how you could program the same algorithm, the same exact one, to filter out noises and meaningless conversations and get right to phrases, words that people are talking about. And if you're talking on any internet feed or phone feed, this is already happening. But a lot of people don't know that they've installed gunshot, quote unquote, gunshot detectors. Now, this is a network of microphones that are probably on every traffic light, stoplight, corner in every major city. And they're connected to a massive CCTV network, a closed circuit television spying on the public, 24-hour surveillance and high definition. And if you travel on the interstate frequently, you'll notice that they put up these giant octagon lights that have about 6 to 8 lights on it, and they're really tall, taller than anything that they used to put up for light poles, energy poles, any of that. And they go down Interstate 10, Interstate 40. I'm sure they have them on the other. Now, these same kind of detectors are there, and then they branch into the city like a network, and at each city stop, at each intersection, they have these gunshot detectors. Now, supposedly that would be to cut down on crime. And they have these installed in my town. And whenever a sound goes off, the estimated time of arrival of police forces is about 3 minutes if the gunshot activation is been triggered. But this could be set up for any kinds of sounds anywhere. And when you combine that with the internet surveillance of everything, you'll realize that there's a total grid over the human domain and our activity, what we're doing, where we're going. And you see how that fits into the new social credit score and track and trace system of the now. It's not of the future. They're already implementing that. Yeah, so that's where we're at for 2022. Now, when you put in the need for basic resources that people are going to be having to have, as you know, there's a lot of healthcare shortages. There's a lot of police shortages. There's a lot of firefighter shortages. All of these things have been purged out, basically, of our society. So we're ripe tinderbox for social unrest. And as we were talking about before, once people's bellies are empty, they start to act dramatically different. And then when you factor in the dramatic increase of mental illness in our era, and and I'm counting the pandemic as a major part of the mental illness epidemic, you can see that the rat race is ongoing and in high gear right now. And like a sinking ship, you need to have, not to coin a diamond over there, but proper prior planning, so you can prevent piss poor performance in the future. If I said that right, I'm surprised I got that tongue twister, but obviously that's what's going to happen. So in 2022, your goal in life should be to completely lock down healthcare for your family, completely lock down resources to get water and food. And this is without any type of, help from the system or any type of help from the grid or anything, and be able to survive at least a few year period. Be able to protect your family, feed your family, and take care of their healthcare needs. Now, this sounds like an impossibility, and indeed is an impossibility for millions of people, especially those that have no idea about the topics that we talk about, have no idea that any of these programs are real, and that it's much more than a science fiction movie on one of your fake metaverse streaming outlets that you get most people get their news and entertainment from one source, and that source is the same source that's causing all of these other issues in the other areas, as we know by meetings like Davos. I guess it's fancy, and it would be great to talk about what is an actual control of this top-down pyramid of control and reset that we're about to have, but does it really matter? It doesn't when it comes down to feeding your family, protecting your family, and keeping your healthcare up, because that's become a real thought of mine, because I have this infection, and I've already gone through 3 rounds of antibiotics, and they have not got rid of the infection, which means that I probably have a resistant form of that. And if you just imagine no heat for hot water, and these basic things that you get used to, and you don't have an alternative method to accomplish these goals, like just a simple hot cloth or hot bottle of water that you can't make because there's no power, you're in some real trouble. And if you think about, and I know that we've talked about this at nauseum, if the grid goes down for any reason and distribution stops for any reason, people with healthcare problems like diabetes, cancer, all kinds of things are just cut, and are no longer a priority for the system or anyone else when it's dog eat dog.
Yeah, to follow that up with the reports coming out of Xi'an over in Shanxi province in China at the moment, everybody's locked into their homes. They're not even allowed to go out for food. The only reason you're allowed to go out is to get COVID tested or get vaxxed. There's no other reason for you to leave the house. If you leave the house, you are rounded up and never seen again. And then you saw, though, they took those 4 guys or people out. I think they were all men. Down near the border with Myanmar and Vietnam, that border area, and paraded them out in the white hazmat suits, put their big picture across there, and then walked them across the neighborhood and through the city to make an example of them. So people are getting the message, don't leave your house for any reason, not even food. So then that was one of the things that everybody's talking about in Xi'an currently is all the people you just mentioned. Like there's a bunch of people that need cancer treatment. Like the pain is so unbearable. All I do is try to bite that blanket so I don't scream. Like this is the kind of things. How much longer do you think it'll be before that person just doesn't make it? You know, we saw the same things in China when they first didn't know really what was COVID going. They were welding people into their homes. Like nobody's coming out. They just welded people's doors shut. And if you came out, you were arrested on site. And they had all these army walking through with like live rounds, full machine guns, all fully what you consider an army in play in the cities to keep everybody locked in. If you come out, you were rounded up on the spot. And all those apparently rounded up on the spot were never ever seen again. So where did they go? What happened to them? Nobody knows. Again, China, there's a huge amount of people, tens of millions of people disappeared in this rounds of COVID. What happened to them? Same thing that's happening here. Like, where are all these people going? Well, we're not arresting people for being outdoors, but in Xi'an, they're already coming to that medical thing. And that's the whole big news story is people are starving in the homes. The last mile is a breakdown in 101 of how a system breaks down the last mile. They can't get the food. They can get it into the city, sort of, but they can't get it to anybody's house. Apparently, they're sitting on oodles of food in the warehouses. Soldiers are trying to bag it up, but they can't get it to the people. So that whole thing there, and even the simplest of medicines, which you referenced there, have run out in Xi'an, and that was such a short amount of time. It's only been, 7 to 10 days, depending on how you want to count it as the lockdown. But people have already started to run out of their meds. Couldn't get to the hospitals prior because they wouldn't let a lot of people out to go for what you consider those preventative treatments or ongoing treatments. It seems that the world's being called in this particular way, that anybody with a pre-existing condition is just going to have to ride it out without the meds, and whoever survives, survives. If you don't, it was a draw on the system anyway. And you really do scare me with that, Ransom, when you say that these people are coming off their meds. Now, I know a couple of people who were on these called SSRI inhibitors, and when they went off their meds, they were different people. No bones about it. Completely unbelievable. Different walking shell, behaving different shell of that person. The paranoia, one minute they're schizophrenic, the next minute they're terrified, the next minute they trust, the next minute you're their worst enemy. It's the weirdest thing. And that all happens within minutes. It's all this pinball thing all over the place of emotion, of thought. And those are very dangerous people to have around at that point. Yeah, people smoking weed, great. If they can't get their weed, some people drinking, they can't get their alcohol. Okay, that's way, way, way easier to deal with once you can refocus the energy, I guess. Then, all right, there won't be any alcohol, but we can get some better exercise, whatever it is. You can get up earlier to get more stuff done, get more food in your belly. Grow some more grain so then you can, at the end of the season, keep some of that corn and then make more alcohol for next year. But you got to work at it. We're going to go a year with no alcohol, but when we grow the grain, we'll make our own moonshine next year. That's your goal this year, man. Okay, a lot of people could handle that. We'll start drinking at the holidays again next year after the harvest. But people coming off their meds, on the psychological sense, that's going to be super dangerous. And, I as much as you can try to get yourself mentally prepared for people that aren't going to make it, that that are in some of these situations, it's still incredibly difficult when it comes to it and you're hearing the news or seeing it. It's different to work it out in the mind how it might be and how your emotion trying to box that into a different room so you don't feel it. And people, that have gone through these dramatic chapters of history always come out on the other side with very little emotion at the end of it because they've been through so much. They've seen so much. It just nothing shakes them anymore. These are the types of times that I believe we're moving into. So how do you wild forage for some of your own medicines, or how do you wild forage for plants that you can make to medicine, or you can grow to turn into medicine? Now, Ransom, I'm not prying or anything, but this is a personal medical question I might ask you. You don't have to answer. Did you use a lot of antibiotics before? Is this why they're not taking hold as much, or are they weaker than what they were before? I'm just curious, because do you think they've cut the batch. Like a dealer will cut, and maybe they're pretending there's enough pills because a lot of it's filler and coating, and maybe that's around, but the actual antibiotic itself to put into that isn't, unless you're getting injections or something like this. I don't know. Both possible, and I'm just throwing it out there for you.
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. I don't actually, I don't know because I'm not testing the antibiotics for purity or nothing. But I think actually what it was is I just had a little bit of financial trouble for a couple of years, and this last year I got reinfected several times and put off going to the dentist for too long. And I had some dental issues, and actually in my lifetime I've barely ever taken any antibiotics up until this point. So I think what happened is I've taken 3 doses and never killed the infection completely, and now I think I'm to the point where that specific kind of treatment is becoming useless. So I don't know, maybe they did cut it down because that's the reason that bacteria actually become antibiotic resistant, is either that you didn't take a full course, it didn't get deep enough penetration, or you quit taking it before you were supposed to. A lot of people know that. That can happen. I really wanted to get into that, not to change the topic, but you
Yeah, wait a
brought up.
second. Before we change topic, can I ask you a question? Are you gargling or using colloidal silver in your mouth at all?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I
What
have.
do you think the benefit or the assistance to anything versus not using colloidal silver? Because that might be another one to get the electrolysis kit. So if you have a silver round, you can make your own colloidal silver in the house. So what do you feel having it, gargling with it versus not?
I think it absolutely helps, but only for surface stuff. It's not a strong enough content. You'd have to have a stronger content, or maybe even a bigger molecule of silver for it to actually do good. Taking it internally. But let me tell you this, and I know this to be at least it works for me. I'm not giving advice to anybody, but I would
This
say
is for Neanderthals.
yeah, okay, for Neanderthals, for about the last 10 years, anytime I had a weird tingle in my nose, where I felt like I had a virus coming on, and I had on stock like a bottle of colloidal silver and I just snorted it, I didn't get sick. Times that I didn't have that and I felt the same tingle and I knew kind of, I must have, breathed in something and it's starting to, uh, get a viral load in me, and I didn't have it, I got sick. So as far as that goes, I know that as far as topically, most of the colloidal silver that you can buy out there, you got to read it and make sure that it's the right kind. Don't ingest it if it's the wrong kind. But they make some that's bigger molecules, and actually, I used one of those that was for pets one time for an infection, and it cleared it right up. A surface cut that had a kind of nasty stuff in it. Those are absolutely good things, but they don't work internally, like from inside of your bones like antibiotics do. So there's different things and different qualities of that. But I would absolutely add that to your list of must, is to learn how to use electrolysis to make colloidal silver, and keep that on stock, because it does more than just antibiotic for yourself, but you could clean things with it, sterilize things with it. You can put a little bit in water and store it longer than normal. There's a lot of uses actually for things like that. And I wasn't really, you know, changing the topic because this ties into your medical, your medical situation as it is now. You brought up those guys in China, and how they had those hazmat suits, and they put them out there to shame them. I bet most people don't know how they were identified in the first place. It's a combination. Some of them were told on by someone else, like you were talking about before. But in China right now, I've read at least 3 articles about it. I'd have to dig it up and send it to you, about how China's using their fake facial recognition system to identify people that don't wear their mask properly, people that are non-vaccinated people. They identify them on the street because the system is already linked to their social credit score and already linked to their health history, their health care or medical history. And the same algorithm, you could add in that gunshot detection. And I've heard you talk about before how people in China will talk very loudly about mundane topics so that everyone knows that they're not doing anything bad. Now, I kind of wanted to ask you, with this new reality appearing, and it's going to be in the United States. I think I mean, I don't think, I know the technology has already been deployed. It hasn't been put in our faces like they do in China, where they just go get you because you're a thought criminal, or because you disregarded some regulation that they did or broke a rule. They'll just come get you. They'll shame you. They may even, you might end up being harvested depending on your offense there. But the same is kind of at least possible and ongoing in the United States. They haven't pushed it in our face, but all of these systems are working here. Facial recognition, and as I told you, in Mexico, they have a little guy that's marking it down, and they're taking a picture of people. All of this is going to be used against you for not just not adhering to medical advice by your world government authorities, but local infractions, thought crimes, talking about things, maybe having illegal products. When the system says you're not allowed to have this product or that product, like ivermectin or some of the other things that they're destroying in the U.S. mail now. We already dox people here. It's a phenomenon on social media where, if you had committed wrong thing or did the wrong thing or said the wrong thing, that they'll, show everybody in the world where you live and who you are. And they're doing a similar thing to that shaming in China. But think about it here. It's already going, and they're making lists. They've admitted to making lists of people. And if you don't think that that's happening, you're kind of naive. Now, why would they do it and not use it yet here? And I think that the debate over our fundamental unalienable rights is not at a conclusion here yet. It will be shortly, though. As you can see, they're using this pandemic and thought crimes here in the United States to try to shut down other avenues to make it basically null and void the fact that you have rights. And that's going to come into play once they get a couple more decisions through emergency powers. We will live in a completely exact society as China, where every movement, every thought, maybe you snickered at a cop while you walked by, all of that will be used against you. It's just like here. We have this saying, you don't have to say anything, because everything you say, it can and it will be used against you. They don't say that it'll be used for you or to protect you or to prove your innocence or none of that. It's against you. And now there's so many ears and eyes in a technological standpoint that we are in the exact same system as China. So we're right there at the cusp of it. And I think they're going to use new food restrictions because of, problems and things like that. You'll remember days of these zombies going to Black Friday sales for years, hurting each other. I think that was a small psychological test to find out what people would do with not only artificial scarcity, where all of these people think that they can't get these things for this cheaper price that's not really cheaper, but you see that they would trample each other, stomp on each other for a little bit of a deal. Now you switch that out with life-saving medicine and food. Now you get a real picture of where we're going here and why they would be ready to use that technology against us.
Yeah, that's why I say grow lights. You'd be able to if you can produce your own food, you can stay out of the melee for a little bit. And, 2 points to follow with that. I have a couple Army buddies that I know, not intimately as like best friends, but, congenial to talk, etc. They know my channel. And I picked their brain a little bit on what they learned in the military. The first wave of breakdown, most people will have a full tank of gas, or the gangs will be able to steal enough gas to have many cars in their fleet, if you will, going out marauding. But those cars are only going to go approximately halfway on the full gas tank range. You might have a few stupid strays that will come out past their return range, but most will understand that if you get 300 miles of a full tank, you only go 150 and you come back. There's a lot of fuel at that point, so almost every car is fueled up. The first wave will come out to where you live, perhaps, if it touches you. If it's repelled, the second wave will be much less, because by the time people return back and this fuel's burned up in the first 1 week of people just trying to get to the next location, and then gangs doing their thing, most of the fuel will be gone after that. So there should be less and less intrusion from, people with a tank full of gas the further you get down the road, no pun intended. Be just about, the first and second wave, and then pretty much after that it's over. So you'll have to be responsible for your own food production, because that applies to you too. You're not going to be out there driving too far unless you live, if your town's 10 miles from your house, like that's a 20-mile round trip, you get 10 times and your car's empty. You got to be seriously thinking about how much you're going to make every single mile count at that point. And I got this thermal monocular for Christmas. Now, it looks out about 1,200 feet. And what I noticed, since you were talking about cameras and lights and energy sources, this thermal monocular picks up anything, because we have cameras on our property, and so do our neighbors, and the cameras glow too. That infrared that the cameras are putting out at night are visible in this thing, and they're glowing hot because they have an energy source on them. And any transformer is glowing super hot. So as you look around the landscape, if you have a thermal monocular, you might be able to pick up a few of those, what is considered hidden cameras. Now, I've only been using it around my property and up in the forest on these super dark nights. Haven't been looking at in the sky yet. It's been all clouds. Haven't had a clear day to look up in the sky. I'm curious what I'll see at night up there, enhanced with the thermal vision. But the things around you in your environment that you don't know are still wired and hot. Like those transformers on the telephone poles or electric lines, one and the same here out in the countryside. And it carries your internet too. So you start to notice a lot more things looking in a different wavelength of light. So I'm curious about taking this around deeper into the suburbs, the cities, how stoplights will look, how many other cameras you'll pick out that you don't know are there. I'm wondering how 5G towers will look with this thing at night. I got a whole bunch of what ifs with looking at things at nighttime in thermal imaging. But even as simple as it is right now, you can start to see things glowing really easy that are heat emitting, listening, or communications grabbing devices. Pretty easy to spot them with this thing. They might be blended on a tree. I haven't been up to the game cams in our upper property yet, but I want to go up and see if this will also pick up game cams. Because then you could walk around and see if people have placed cameras in different areas. So when it comes down to it, yeah, this food thing is going to be something that, our grandparents talked about the Great Depression, having to live through it. They tried to explain it. It didn't make sense at the point for me as a child, but I get it now. It was an all society encompassing, all society shifting event that affected everybody for the rest of their lives. So we're about to, move through this transition in the beginning of the cycle. Since we're in the beginning of it, I would expect incredible earth changes coming in here in this no later than March of this year. So you're really going to have to get things in high gear quickly. I would say your timeline's 3 months, and then you're kind of done. At that point, I'm going to say it's not impossible. But I don't know, Ransom, what do you think? How long do you really give it before supply chains are non-functional, and what we're discussing where a city might get cut off because of no drivers? Would the autonomous driving vehicles substitute and take over to resume deliveries? What happens with the magnetic field on the planet, and our crust starts to rift and shake more, and then a lot of our infrastructure pulls, like bridges pulling away from the banks, fiber optic cables snapping, pipelines, rifting apart several hundred feet, because it just literally snapped. So I don't know, what's your inbound time on these changes you're talking about with the food here? I'm still going to stick with my Q1 of 2022. What's your feeling?
I agree with that. I think 2022, if you compare right now, what you can get right now, and start paying attention to the increase in price, availability, you'll realize that they're going to incremental this shortage right into 2023. And by 2023, you're going to remember what it was like to be able to go to the store and get things, and it'll be a different experience. That's what I think. Now, I guess it all depends on how much garbage they've made. You know, like if you've ever gone to a dollar store, you'll realize that there is food-like stuffs in there, and Walmart's kind of similar. The majority, like 90% of their aisles of so-called food is actually products that they're food-like stuff, and they have warehouses full of this. So they will, you know, kind of please the masses with breads. If you kind of get grain, like ready-made stuff in a box, that kind of stuff, until that's gone. And then when that's gone, everybody will realize there's really actually no food available. But I did have some questions for what you were talking about your thermal thing, or not so much questions. I've been wanting to get one of those and test out Mylar, you know, space blankets. You can get those.
Yeah, me too. That's what we're doing here next week. When it gets real cold, it's supposed to get down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit from Sunday and snow here. But we already have those thermal blankets, those emergency rescue blankets. And I'm really curious if those things, if we can block it out. I'm already on your same mind frame.
Yeah, exactly. Because allegedly Mylar, you know, bounces back about 99% of the heat. So it'd be real interesting if you can successfully hide heat sources to where your thermal goggles can't pick it up. And another thing I was going to tell you, and this is just a little bit of free knowledge that I know. Everything including remotes, any kind of television monitor, any of that stuff is all on an infrared frequency. So you can see alarms, you can see all kinds of stuff. You can see phones doing weird things with when they're not being in use, because they put out an infrared beam every couple of seconds to get a three-dimensional map of the environment. Phones already do that. But what I was going to say is that if you set up a security system and do not use the infrared LEDs that usually come with those, and you get a program that can change the exposure and saturation and things like that all the way inside of the device itself, you can arrange cameras. I do it all the time for weird graphics that I come up with. But anyway, you could be in a totally dark room and arrange the exposure and saturation, contrast, etc., until you get a fully visible map. Now, it won't be the same colors, but it shows you exactly what's going on in almost pitch black, using every little piece of light available. You'd be amazed at what cameras actually can do if you play with the settings on them. So there is a way to set up a security system to where every other person that has thermal or FLIR is not going to see your infrared beams, you know, like a torch in the night out there. And, you know, you can also, with those goggles, you should do this as an experiment, is go around and pay attention to who's driving and who's not. And you can get an exact time estimate on how long ago someone's been driving a car. So like if you were on your property and you went out and you looked at a car, you could see that, oh, well, those people should be right around here somewhere because the car is hot and they were just here. You know what I mean? Or if it's cold looking, then you got to wonder how long someone's been lurking around your property. I don't know if that's kind of irrelevant.
No, it's the same thing with footprints too. You know, I was standing not barefoot, but in socks out on my front porch looking out in the front field with this thing earlier before the show. And as I stepped away from that, I left heat on the wood that picked up as 2 footprints on the ground, on the wood, I should say. So I'll start to look around for all these different types of, you know, anomalies. And it's not that you see a beam coming off of your camera. It's just that the camera itself is glowing hot. So it's a round dot. And the same with the transformers. They look like those little cylinders. They look like miniature corks out of a wine bottle just up there in the air. And when I first started looking, I just couldn't define what these few things were. And I ended up, you know, it took me a minute. So there's a learning curve behind what you're seeing. Plants have a different color depending on how much sunlight that they receive during the day. Because, you know, the helicopters used to fly around with the same technology looking for weed growers because the marijuana plants absorb more heat. That's why the guys in Hawaii, when they were growing, when it was back in the day, used to have a system of nets up in the coconut trees higher up in some of the valleys where tourists don't go. You get a ton of coconut groves up in there, and they would string these entire networks of nets up in the tree and grow in under the canopy, all way off the ground in nets up on, because the coconut trees glow even hotter. So they were masking their grow operations inside the tree canopy or just below it, because the coconut glowed hotter than the weed, but the weed would glow the hottest if it was anywhere else in the regular traditional forest. Even a single plant would stick out like a Roman candle. So you know what's the heat thing too, and if you're going to be moving during day and night times, there's a huge difference just coming into dusk on even what the tree line is. So you could hide a little bit in the heat on the tree line. I don't know. I'm starting to play with this tech to see, what can we, I'm waiting for a real clear night also to look up into the heavens and then see what's up there that we don't see with our eyes and what kind of little craft might be jumping around up there. Always something I've wanted to do. And there's how can you use this technology to your advantage? But at the same time, how can you keep your family safe? Like, in knowing these changes are inbound, that's great. And you get some timelines on the things we're speaking about. But then how do you truly put it in action to keep your families, your neighbors, your friends safe? Because, Ransom, you talked about the fire, and then I got another message here just a few minutes ago. Superior, Colorado burned to the ground, 110 mile an hour windstorm, firestorm. So, once FEMA says you're not allowed back in that area, you're not allowed back in that area. They cordon it off again, and I wonder if that'll become a non-inhabitable zone that'll be set aside for the new carbon trading markets. So some of these devastating natural disasters, will it be off limits to ever go back there again? Because you got to think, if you're going to have to exit your house, like this fire thing, man, are you ready? Does everybody have a bug out bag, and where would you go? Right now we have extra fuels, but what if you had prepped out to the nth and you're totally ready to ride out a 10-year chaotic period, and then something like that happens and you need to flee and you just can't come back to your house? It's either burnt or, somebody got in there to occupy it in terms of like government readiness, and then they found, oh, look at all this stuff around here. This person didn't come back. We took this as our command post. Then what? I mean, there's so many variables moving through it. We can only see or kind of game out maybe what will, be the safest course of action. I mean, even me, super remote out here, I got to think of a plan C and plan B of what if I do have to leave everything out here, including the land, which offers me protection, and then I need to go back into a more populated area, then what? Or a less populated area, then who do you go to? I don't know. It's a lot of questions and a lot of answers I just don't have.
Well, I'll give you some pointers. Inside my go bag is actually one outfit that's fire resistant, along with a gas mask. And just in case you run into a forest fire or had to deal with a forest fire, you could actually make it through an area without passing out and dying. And I did wanted to clarify, you got thermal goggles. Kind of what I was talking about is how the military uses FLIR, forward-looking infrared, and inside of it, well, you could use your own security cameras to kind of see this. I have several infrared flashlights. The security cameras themselves, or any infrared system, not a thermal, not the kind that shows heat, but the kind that points out infrared light and heat, like FLIR. It will show a beam of light where the light for your security camera shows. So that's how your security camera sees in the dark. It has that little LED beam that shines out there. And you're right, it does get hot. But if you're using something like FLIR or another security system, you can actually see the beam of light light up the entire area as if it's daylight. I've actually done quite a bit of experimental stuff with that. That is a way to keep your family safe, is being able to think about some of these basic technologies and use them in a way that's not the same as they were intended. And to think ahead on these situations, think about being stuck in your property if you live in a remote area and a forest fire has now surrounded you and blanketed the area, maybe not completely with flames, but with smoke. And how would you know what's going on if everything was bright and smoky? You could use some thermal goggles and a gas mask to get out of that. They're just little trinkets you might think that you would never use until you need to use them. Like lots of things like that. Just having it gives you a multiplied option of choices, and allows you to, um, navigate parameters a whole lot better in different circumstances. And another thing is to think about these things. It's kind of a proven thing in psychology that when you work problems over in your mind or think about them when it's time to act, you have less problem thinking about what's going on, and you have a faster response time. So like, it's a good idea to have equipment like gas masks for every member of your family, not just for a chemical or gas attack, but any number of emergencies that you could use that tool in your tool belt to, kind of increase the odds of survival for you and your family.
Yeah, having breath is going to be a need, but think about that. Through the COVID thing, all the masks have been bought out. I mean, I do know a couple guys that are into construction, and you can still go to Home Depot and get the respirators off the side for painting and that sort of thing. But I don't think that many people have their replaceable cartridges or even have thought out. They're more thinking like N95, and then something that would need to cover your eyes at the same time. A lot of people aren't at that level and remotely, and getting to this air is very important thing, and water is very important as well. I mean, I could go hang out in the middle of my field with my neighbor's field too. We got probably 60 acres clear out here of the whole right up to the forest, and hang out there in the middle. But you're right, it'd be inundated by smoke, fumes of whatever's burning. And then, if the fires didn't come down into the field, what would you be left with? Okay, you're stuck out in the field and you're watching all your goods get burned up. That's not a nice feeling. But yeah, you're still alive, still be able to work with it. But what would you drag out of your house into the middle of the field? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I know you can't do it anymore. I think you can still do it on eBay, perhaps, or maybe some other site. You used to be able on Amazon to straight up get, Army surplus Israeli gas masks or things like that will take care of smoke, chemical, biological. And if you had one for your whole, like each person has that in their go bag along with an extra filter, which is exactly what I have in my go bag. You have different scenarios you can use the same tool for. But you're right. If anything that you think about like that would help, like those not N95, but the 3M paint masks that people use to paint automotive, work really good. But even those allow some particles to get in, but it is better than nothing. What would someone do though? See, this is the thing that everybody's faced with, and we all have to think about it, is all of these different angles of survival. And our system is set up to make you think about exactly the opposite of all those things, and make you want and want to deal with the entertainment and fast food and all. It's all set up to push you in the exact wrong direction for any type of survival scenario, which I think tonight we've laid out, I don't know how many, several different scenarios that are possible right now in the time we live in. So here we are. It's time to figure it out.
Yeah, I have, some emergency water drinking straws. I think they can filter about 10,000 gallons, a few of those around. And if you have a bigger car and you're able to run out with something, bring 30 gallons of water with you, bring the Berkey filter with you. If you have a few minutes to be able to load up your pickup or whatever, your car or whatever with stuff, you're going to want to take that sort of thing with you. Because if you need to even camp out in the field there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, at least you can get your water, cook stove, that sort of thing, to be able to, heat up some food and whatnot while you deal with it and try to just figure out what's going on. Especially in remoter areas when, they'll send people out, but it's not. The more remote you get, the less help you get too. Good. There's a trade-off, but neighbors help each other more. And big kind of giant disasters like that, yeah, there'll be people out there, but you might not get the emergency services you're looking for an extended period of time. In a bigger city or in a town that's all directly road connected in 18 different directions, yeah, help's coming fast. But you're way out here on the edge of the Smoky Mountains at the Cherahela National Forest, at the edge of it, neighbors are few and far between. And even if the whole edge of the range burnt, how many other small towns, cabins, and things? It's you're down on the list of getting in a super remote location to get help. You're going to be on your own for a while. So think about it like that, where if an emergency happened, you're on your own for 7 days, 10 days before you can really get help. But the situation we're moving into is you're going to be looking for that 3 to 6 months by yourselves. So if you could put a time frame on it, what do you need to get ready? Something for about 6 months. In the beginning, hopefully systems would stabilize when we come into the summertime and more stable growing seasons where people could put up gardens, etc. But, we're talking 6 months from now.
Well, I would suggest that if you are a person that puts together a go bag, that inside that go bag, like you were saying, what would you run into the house if you had 5 minutes to get and you've already got a bag packed? What should be in that bag? Well, obviously you should have some type of self-defense in the bag. Water straw is great, gas mask, tools to, like I have a set of metric tools, a very small set of metric tools, screwdrivers, simple things that you can manipulate your environment with. But on top of that, some of the main important things I would think would be several bags of seeds that you could get going fast if you have to stay for a prolonged period of time. But in the meantime, you would need some kind of concentrated plant-based material for your vitamins, also a vitamin supplement, and a compact protein source that you could take with you so that you could have something to eat long enough to grow if you possibly had to never come back again.
Yeah, whey protein powders. Right now, you can get a decent. There's a lot of sales right now for whey protein powders. The stuff that weightlifters build and the keto diet stuff. There's a lot of that out there, and that is a lot of nutrient density and fat and protein in a very small amount of space. Easy to supplement that. As long as you have water, you can drink that down. You don't even need to cook your meals. I mean, you could go on sort of a liquid diet for a few days at least with the protein powders and vitamin C, camu powder. You can mix that right in your water. It's one of the highest, densest vitamin C absorbables on the planet. It's a fruit from India. I wonder if how many things are still left in the Army surplus stores. When you're a kid and you walk in, it was like stacked to the ceiling of stuff. I'm wondering how much is left of that. If you go into a regular traditional Army surplus store, what would you find in today's world in there? Or would they be all sold out of the same stuff we want to get? But we got a couple of empty ammo boxes left. That's it. Those are deep questions. I might actually go to an Army surplus store just to see what they have out there. There's one about maybe 30, 35 minutes from here, up a small country road into a small town. There's a little one up there. Wonder what's existing in it. David Dubine signing off. Thanks for joining Ransom Godwin from 420 TV, Freedomist Films, and myself tonight. Your time's so valuable. Thank you for spending it with us. Get prepped out. We'll see you next week. Happy New Year. See you next year.
Listening to Revolution Radio.